Welcome to Session 1. You watched the opening and presentation from UIL and coordinating cities. Let me give the notice again for those who joined after the conference started. Please carefully read the notice on the screen. If you have any questions for speakers, please post them in Q&A section in Zoom. Moderators will collect them for discussion. If you have any comments to share, please post them in the chat. Click the language for translation. You may find an Earth-like icon on the menu. Please click it and you can tune in on English, Korean, and Greek channel. From now on, Mr. Roberto Guevara has the floor.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good day. I'm Jose Roberto Guevara. I am speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia, and I just in the spirit of global learning cities and where I am found, I am located. I just want to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and the Bunwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands I conduct my business, being part of RMIT University. My university respectfully acknowledges their elders and ancestors past, present, and emerging. And also we acknowledge the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and the waters across Australia. And so I bid you greetings from Australia. I bid you greetings also from the indigenous peoples here, but also I welcome you to this discussion today. And so I think if for those who were here for the first part, we were welcomed by the two host cities, Larissa and Yeonsu, and it was very inviting to see cities learning together. And so today, the first session I am honored to present is the first session that will look at the theme of citizenship education and fostering environmental sustainability. And we have two keynote speakers and three presenters from cities that will share with us their experience. I just wanted to check because we wanted to make sure that there's opportunity for conversation and discussion. The instructions were to put questions in the chat box. So I just want to check that people are able to enter questions in the chat box. So please direct your questions there. I have Christiana from UIL, the UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning, will be helping me to monitor the chat box. But if you just want to have a comment, then please feel free to use the chat box and the Q&A. Okay, and so with that, so we have we look forward, therefore, for you to be able to engage with us in this next session. And so I just want to make sure all our speakers are we're here, and in between speakers there'll be opportunities perhaps when we do have the technical turnover of their sharing their slides. And so I'd like to welcome Arjen. I think I last saw Arjen in 2014 or 2015, long time in Japan at the end of the Education for Sustainable Development decade in Japan. So Arjen, can we check that you can share your screen, please?
I'm trying now. Let's see.
Okay, we can see you.
Yeah, I think I can.
Okay.
You can see it?
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce Arjen Wals, Professor of Transformative Learning for Socio-Ecological Sustainability at the Wageningen University in the Netherlands, and also a guest professor on whole school approaches to sustainability at the Norwegian Life Sciences University. He's also currently the chair of the UNESCO Social Learning and Sustainable Development. And so again, as I said, I welcome back Arjen, and it's nice to see you again and traveling this journey in terms of environmental sustainability, but now trying to fuse together this idea and looking at citizenship education as we're being hosted by the Global Network of Learning Cities. So you have your 15 minutes, Arjen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto. It's an honor to be speaking to you in this unusual times. And I will take 15 minutes, hopefully. I won't be talking too fast because I have a lot to say. But let me try and start right away. So one question that I would like to pose to all of you is, what does it mean, good citizenship, in times of what I would call systemic global dysfunction? And systemic global dysfunction refers to the way we are living on the earth in terms of how we deal with planetary boundaries and the ecological ceiling that we have to learn to live within, but also in terms of how we deal with rising populism, the loss and the erosion of confidence and truth and trust in institutions, and the demise in many parts of the world of democracy. These are serious issues, and we need to find a way to live together on a healthy planet, and not just us as human species, but also our fellow species that we are all entangled with. So how do we do that? I'd like to introduce to you, and many of you may know, Kate Raworth's donut. She introduced the donut economy, and to me it's a very useful way of looking at our challenge. How do we become good citizens that can live within the ecological ceiling, protecting our climate, our ocean, the biodiversity around us, making sure that we have clean air to breathe, and that we do not pollute with chemicals and nanoplastics, microplastics, and so on. But at the same time, also live equitably with good education, gender equality, social equity, having political voice, which she calls the social foundation. And the challenge for our generation and future generations is to learn to live in that safe and just space for humanity. And she also suggests that that requires a different way of looking at economics, maybe looking at we-economics, where we become more mindful of each other, less competitive and more collaborative, and where we regenerate and become more circular in the way we think about production and consumption and so on. The Sustainable Development Goals kind of fit in this donut. Some are more on the outskirts, connecting with the planet side. Some are more in the middle, connecting with prosperity and people more. And all of these are intertwined and connected. And I think that is critical. Because if we look historically at what I call planetary educations, education that tries to improve the well-being of people and planet, there is a risk of what you might call competition between topics that all scream and demand our attention. This is something I created when I did a review of the decade of education for sustainable development that Roberto already referred to. Where you see all these different kinds of educations, and I haven't even added global citizenship education to this one at the time, but there's climate change education, there's consumer education, health education, human rights education, development education, and all these educations, environmental education, they all, when you look at them in a very narrow way, they're quite distinct and different, and you can draw boundaries between them, but when you look at them more broadly, and you start seeing the connections between all these issues, they are all talking about some common themes that has to do with utilizing diversity, equitable sharing, earth rights, human rights, resilience, degrowth, holism, a kind of planetary consciousness, a deeper kind of democracy. So there's a convergence, and you could call education for sustainability and global citizenship a convergent point of all these different educations. And it's not just about, again, the SDGs, they all connect to these different educations. And the challenge is not so much to see how we can develop all these educations separately, but it's much more about finding a way to be more relational in the way we think, that we are very good at making distinctions, and our education system is very good in categorizing, boxing, talking about subjects and subject matter areas, and making distinctions has become almost the main task of education, whereas seeing connections and seeing interrelationships and seeing interdependencies how our lives are connected with the lives of people elsewhere in the world, how our lives are connected to other species, how our lives are connected to past generations and to future generations. This kind of relationality is critical if we are to become more sustainable. I must flag that it is not so easy in a time where we are inundated with information, where we are inundated also with false information, where through the social media there's a lot of nonsense that goes viral, is easily replicated, and it demands for also a critical literacy, a critical understanding of where does information come from, who put it there, with what kind of intent. Otherwise, people will get confused, and confusion can lead to a kind of withdrawing, a kind of apathy, not knowing who to believe, who to trust, which could just amplify and accelerate unsustainability. So this critical literacy, digital literacy, media literacy is an essential component of sustainability. And I don't talk much maybe specifically about environmental sustainability as my main topic is today, because I think it's critical that we try to look at sustainability as a holistic concept that includes ecological sustainability, that includes economic sustainability, that includes ethics and values, that we see these connections, and that we also become critical of some of the mechanisms and structures that make living in a sustainable life and become good citizens very difficult. Because these structures that are often connected to colonial ways of thinking, that are connected to neoliberal ways of thinking, that have a certain idea about expansion and growth and market share and shareholder value, these are kind of principles and mechanisms that make living together in a more ecologically balanced way on this earth and in a more equitable way on this earth very difficult. So also critiquing and becoming aware of, and depending on the context that we live in, trying to transcend and maybe disrupt even these kinds of structures is an essential part of critical citizenship education. We must recognize that a lot of young children, and not just young children, also many adults, are very worried about the future. And there is a kind of a dystopian future that is not very generative, not very energizing. There is kind of a fear that is real and also cultivated sometimes, that can lead to apathy, depression, anxiety, and that can actually lead to a withdrawing of these important issues. So we must create what I call a pedagogy of hope to overcome a culture of fear. And we see a lot of young people rising and trying to say to policymakers and international bodies, governance bodies and national governance bodies, that if we are to have a planet that we as young generation can live on still, we must act now. There is an urgency, a climate urgency, a biodiversity urgency that demands that we learn to live differently on this planet. Greta Thunberg is a good example of a young person trying to mobilize people, also asking questions about education. What is education for? Are we being prepared for a future that will be affected, and in many parts is already affecting a lot of people, leading to migration of people and making it very hard to live well on this planet. So we are in a time where being and becoming a good citizen is not so easy, because there's a lot of complexity and uncertainty, confusion, extinction of truth. People are highly connected through our technologies, but we're kind of disconnected between the places where we inhabit, and we are also disconnected in the sense that we do not have a meaningful connection with people around us, and that we are also disconnected from the physical spaces and nature around us, and we need to reclaim those connections. So connectivity probably asks for less screen time and more green time, as I like to say. So dominant conventional economic logic we need to start questioning, and that requires a critical perspective. And we must be careful not to get lost in apocalyptic futures, which can undermine our energy, our willingness to make change. So in the end, we do need a continuous learning going on in what I call a reflexive society towards attractive futures for all. Sustainable development need not be depressing. It can be generative, it can be energizing. And there are so many hopeful examples and movements that can actually inspire people all over the world. And some of these movements are grounded in indigenous perspective, more relational ways of being in the world, whether this is Ubuntu or Bien Vivir in Latin America, Ubuntu in Africa, there and all over the world, we see pockets of innovation that are more geared towards sustainable living. So what does it mean to be a good citizen? It refers to a citizen who is responsible and caring and fulfilling in terms of one's social and democratic duties, but also actively participating in creating a healthy and peaceful society in which all people can be heard and can take initiative, care for each other, express themselves, be critical and generative. This is from a background paper that I've been working on for the GRIL. It's a global report on adult learning and education, which talks also as a separate chapter on learning, citizenship and sustainability and adult education. In these definitions, we often find some anthropocentric tendencies. We tend to focus on the human, ignoring the non-human and the more than human world. That's something that I'd like to flag. There's also sometimes a tendency to see it as citizenship as something that we can train or that we can condition people, and that is a very instrumental way of looking at citizenship. It is much more, I think, in terms of trying to avoid this instrumental trap, we must look at more emancipatory perspectives on citizenship, and I'll say something about it in a minute. And there are, of course, social, cultural, and regional differences in what is emphasized more. In some African contexts, there's some evidence of more fluid and more emergent forms of citizenship that call for a more flexible definition of urban citizenship based on rights and responsibility. An understanding of the complexity of grassroots movements and associations that often focus on the marginalized poor. In Asia, there are some tensions emerging as a result of rapid economic growth, extreme wealth consolidation, highly volatile democratization processes which affect the manifestations and possibilities for more emancipatory forms of citizenship. We did some research that shows that if we want to engage with SDG 4.7, which is about climate change, global citizenship, and education for sustainable development, and SDG 4, quality education, is one of the mechanisms that can lead and help develop all the other SDGs in a way. It's more a process and a mechanism, you could say. And these are 5 that are critical. 1, we must engage with values and ethics and the moral issues around questions of distribution, around question of future generations and interspecies equities, intergenerational equity, and so on. Second, we need to pay attention to diversity as something that can be generative in leading to more creative futures and creative ways of living more lightly on the earth. Dissonance is a critical component of learning to think differently, disrupting common systems and routines, agency, empowerment, transformative capacity, giving space for people to bring about change in their own lives, in their own communities, and creating spaces also in education for this is critical so that people can experience that it's possible to change things and to learn from the attempt, what's working with you, what's working against you as well, and how can we overcome structural barriers, change and transitions, understanding the difference between optimizing an existing way of doing things or transitioning to an alternative way that's based on different assumptions and values and constitutes a much deeper change. And in the end, lastly, boundary crossing and systems thinking, this more relational way of knowing and being in the world where we see connections and we learn to connect and relate to each other in a healthier way. An eco-pedagogical approach is one approach that might be fruitful in developing such critical global citizenship. And that's the kind of learning that leads to human actions towards increased social and environmental justice and planetary sustainability. It requires problematizing of the causes of social environmental violence, Misiasa calls this, including oppressive processes of globalization and constructs of development, economics, and citizenships that emerge from what he calls socio-historic oppressions, like colonization, racism, patriarchy, neoliberalism, xenophobia, epistemicide, the loss of certain ways of knowing, and the dominance over nature. And it can help citizens respond to emerging sustainability challenges within what we call this current post-truth challenge. And Gagliotti from the Paulo Freire Institute talks about Gaia, a Gaian pedagogy that connects with this approach, which refers to immersive and relational way of learning that can facilitate deeper connections with place and people and the non-human world, but also can aid decolonization processes. So I'm going to wrap up. We have a huge task, a transition task, where we need to rethink how we live on this earth, if we can connect people and planet by developing forms of citizenship that are more mindful, that are more caring, that are also more critical. There are lots of innovations, pockets of innovation that are happening all over the world, both in the north and the global north, global south, which is also a kind of a false binary these days, I think. And you see some of these different movements, localization of food, localization of power, local energy independence, and so on. And they all connect to new forms of governance, decentralized forms of government, different spirituality is becoming more, meaning making is becoming more important, forms of social entrepreneurship. And the real question or the challenge, I think, is how to connect adult education, but also formal education, to these pockets of innovation. Urban living labs are examples of different stakeholders working together in creating a healthier, more sustainable, more carbon neutral futures. And they all are popping up with citizen science often playing a big role. And these are often temporary constellations or configurations of people learning together to try to figure out a more sustainable way of living. And there are lots of examples, and I don't have time to share them. This is a project on transgressive learning that we were engaged in through Wageningen University, but also many other universities around the world, with different groups, community groups, developing different examples of people co-creating sustainability and developing more mindful, caring forms of citizenship. I don't have time to explain all these stories, but there are a few that I will just run by you. In the end, it looks a living curriculum for schools, connecting with all these pockets of innovation in the community, bridging these different forms of learning, connecting with all the SDGs, trying to see how they are interrelated, I think is a challenge for global citizenship education. And there's a natural connection with education for sustainable development. So the task of global citizenship education is one of creating environments that breathe sustainability and cultures that invite the kind of citizenship that allows for more relational ways of being in the world, but also require the required creativity that we need to generate more sustainable futures. And it implies a shift away from developing, teaching and educating certain mindset that we train or something like that, to designing environments or seeking environments that kind of are conducive, that invite these qualities. So in a way, global citizenship cannot be trained or conditioned. It must be created through designing spaces where people can become more mindful, more sustainable, and more caring. So it's really a different way of looking at education, a more emancipatory perspective. And linking to these niches, these social practices and movements can be a big part of beginning to do so. So thank you very much. I'm sure there will be some questions. There's also possibilities to email me or to go to my blog, transformativelearning.nl, where you find some of the resources that I refer to in my talk. Back to you, Roberto.
Thank you very much, Arjen. Thanks for challenging us. And again, we're now seeing that the Q&A is live. And I just want to, before I pass to the next speaker, while we're now setting up for our next speakers, Joanna, you can set up. I just want to ask the first question. I think it helps set the scene for us instead of waiting for the end. There's a question from Omar Sulyami, who says, Arjen, do you think the definition and development of citizenship education in schools globally have proved problematic? So in other words, I think we can start with this whole question of the definition, because you start with what is a citizen. So in a sense, what is citizenship education? And I'd like to pose not just for schools, I think, because you also say the value of community and adult education. And so while you're answering, and Joanna can perhaps share the screen, but please do answer, Arjen.
Yes, you know, I think citizenship is a dynamic concept. It's inevitably ill-defined. So we always have this tendency to want to fix things and to define things, and then that's our truth. And I think citizenship is highly contextual. It depends a lot on the context that you are in. There will be some common themes, and certainly if we agree on some universal values like caring for the future is important, or equitable sharing is important, fairness is important. If we agree on those, and we must recognize that we do not agree on those, there are people in this world, and many people actually, that believe that competition is important, that it's okay to take care just of yourself and everybody should take care of themselves, that the goal of being on this earth is to grow and expand all the time, and to innovate and to renew all the time, and not to conserve and to preserve things that we have, or to just be. We must always continue to develop. That is a particular value. But so we need to have that conversation about values and ethics. So my short answer would be, we must look for that common core in citizenship. And I think we see some convergence in light of sustainable development that includes being mindful of other species. I'd like to emphasize that, and being more connected to place, and becoming mindful of how systems and structures shape who we are, and often without being aware of it. So that was really critical, that we become more aware of that. But at the same time, we must be careful to prescribe a particular form of citizenship, and then to try to condition people to become that citizen, which I think is kind of counter the idea of emancipation and self-determination and autonomy, and people figuring out together where they should be going.
Thank you very much, Arjen. So I think, so excellent starting point. We've looked at trying to define, as Arjen said, define. Sometimes when we think of defining, we think of prescriptions. And I think what Arjen says, it's not prescriptions, it's trying to find core common values that we might share, yet being contextual. And so in a sense, so thanks for setting the scene, Arjen. And again, what we will do now is to get two of our cities to present their context. And here we have Joanna Krukowska from the UrbanLab program in the Social Innovation Lab Budgetary Unit of the this is Gdynia in Poland, who's a project manager of the UrbanLab, who will share her experience in terms of trying to, and again, as Arjen said, to contextualize. What does it mean to contextualize citizenship education from the perspective of addressing the core issue that Arjen talked about in terms of climate change? So Arjen, hold on, Arjen. There are a few more questions that you can see in the Q&A that I'll ask later on. But thanks, Arjen. If we can give you a round of applause, we'll give you a round of applause. Thank you. Joanna, it's your turn for your 10 minutes. Thanks, Joanna.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad for being here. So I will have to start with a big thanks to the organizers and city coordinators. As well, very, very big thanks to Arjen, because your intro was very inspiring and interesting, and I think it's perfectly connected with my presentation. I will be talking about climate change citizenship education in case of UrbanLab Gdynia program. First of all, a few words about city of Gdynia. Gdynia is a city in the northern Poland. It is located on the southern coast of the Baltic Sea. It has population around 250,000 citizens, and which is important in case of our city that we are part of metropolitan area. In case of institution that I represent Social Innovation Lab, which is autonomous budgetary unit of Gdynia City Hall. Our mission is to develop and support innovative social solutions for citizens with citizens. One of this program, actually one of the department of Social Innovation Lab, is UrbanLab Gdynia. And UrbanLab Gdynia actually is a program aimed at creating a space for dialogue between citizens of the city, NGOs, city institutions, including the scientific and business community. And each of these cross-sectoral and interdisciplinary components consists diagnosing challenges and needs of search for social innovation and solving them. UrbanLab Gdynia is actually a urban living lab for knowledge sharing when we work with different actors in the city, as well as it's actually a physical space. But due to the fact the COVID-19 pandemic, now we are more virtual than physical space. It's a 3-year test because UrbanLab Gdynia established on March 2019. And we are testing the concept of this kind of urban living lab that is working on a citywide program operated by Social Innovation Lab. And our method as Urban Lab consists of 3 levels of working. We work on a policy level and practice level, connecting mayor's community with a strategy group that consists many experts from NGOs or from academia. As well, we focus on thematic teams that try to narrow the challenge and set of problems, which is also very important. We do not work only on a policy level, but we try to create opportunities for new solutions and local cooperation, involving citizens in such elements of city competencies and trying to look forward to new innovative ways of solving some micro level dilemmas. The third element of our method is a new network and ideas, tools, and better understanding each other, better understanding the challenges that we are struggling in the cities. So we have such elements that engage stakeholders and give knowledge as well as network, as well as we think about civic tech and widen citizen access to public data. Moving on to the climate change adaptation, in our 3-year test, strategy group recommended to focus works of UrbanLab Gdynia on the subject of climate change adaptation. In case of our method, we think that 1-year challenge does not assume that we will solve this problem. We know that it's a global and multidimensional consequences connected with many layers of things that Arjen was talking about. But we think that this 1-year focus can give interdisciplinary work and concentrate the energy of many groups, of many sectors thinking about the present and the future. And now I would like to talk to you and tell you a little bit about 2 elements that are connected and concentrated for citizens' education. First of them is City Incubator. You can see our innovators before COVID-19, because now we went online. So first element that we try to educate and include knowledge of citizens and try to give them something from municipality perspective is a city competencies program. It is a short-term skills knowledge course for pledging change pilots and leaders for social change in the city. We organize 6 workshops in 3 subjects. We talk about the city, what is the city and how the city work from the municipality or budgetary unit perspective, talking about legal and formal conditions of the city. The second thing is that we discuss and work on the challenge. Actually, this year's challenge was the climate change adaptation and mitigation. So we create and organize workshop with Deputy Mayor of Gdynia in innovation and Gdynia plenipotentiary on climate change adaptation. So we create these unique occasions to have very small meetings and talks and discussion with city officials. The last thing that we want to that we do in this city competencies program is the skills, because we think that such leaders for social change need to have some tools and methods to create and develop social innovation in their communities or groups that they are trying to do something around this climate change. The second element of the City Incubator is Innovation Incubator. We invite citizens to share the ideas for micro-innovation. So we are not stopping only on competencies and education and knowledge. Also, we try to invite them to give something extra to test by the city. As well as we are testing some ideas, UrbanLab Gdynia is open catalog for innovation for other cities. So after our 3-year test, you could find our innovation that you can implement in your own city. Second element of our education, citizen education, is Urban Cafe. And Urban Cafe is a space for open dialogue and discussion about the city between citizens of Gdynia, activists, NGOs, cities representatives, officials, university professors, and we try to educate in different forms, because we do the film screenings and documentaries about different topics connected, especially in this year, connected with climate crisis, as well as we invite lectures, we invite academics, experts, and practitioners in lectures or in debates. Creating, and the most important thing of this Urban Cafe is to create opportunity to network citizens with themselves, to get to know this people who have the same or different perspective on the goals, but also to have a knowledge based on science. So it's kind of, we know that we live in a perspective of many fake news or different elements that are more complicated for citizens. So we focus on a few subjects, and in case of lectures, we try to give the opportunity to think about climate change as a whole problem, but also talking and discussing and giving opportunity for get this information from experts based on science, connected with chosen elements that are connected with individual way of thinking and way of doing, as well as some abstract elements. Also, we try to collide some perspective in debates to put city officials on the same now virtual table with academia representatives or activists from movements. Our approach consists city representatives' professional skills and knowledge, cooperation and shared responsibility for the city based on community, NGOs, and creating opportunity to get the knowledge from the experts based on science. And moving on and going to the end of my presentation, this is a 3-year test. We are in the half of this way. And we know that climate crisis and problems such as planetary boundaries are very complicated element of challenge for humankind. So we know that we start something based on active citizens, but now we are thinking about next step because time is running up, and we think about challenge how to cooperate and work and educate citizens who are not directly interested in the problem, because we in UrbanLab Gdynia now are focusing and building community of active citizens interested and involved in kind of some ways to the climate crisis problem. And at the end, I put the quote of a member of UrbanLab Gdynia strategic group, who is also a Polish writer and author of many reportages, Philip Springer. And yeah, and this quote that you can read on the slide actually consists a very important element that we are trying to do as UrbanLab. Of course, that we work on policy level, but we want to build a strong community connected with city officials. City officials give the opportunity to get the knowledge, meet some other active citizens, but we believe that strong social network will be able to adapt to such crisis as climate crisis. Yeah, and I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And I think while we will try to consolidate the questions at the end, and I ask the next presenters, but I'd like to focus that you gave us good examples, but I think at the core is what you talked about is your method. There were something in the slide about the method that people from other contexts can learn. So again, a round of applause to Joanna. Thank you very much. I'd like now to invite the Deputy Mayor of the Municipality of Suseong-gu of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Sung-ju Hong, who will share citizenship education to foster environmental sustainability. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You have your 10 minutes up, please. Can we check we can hear you? We can see the slides.
예, 안녕하십니까.
Good morning, good afternoon. And 네, 지금 기술적인 결함으로 인해서 동시 통역이 불가능함을 양해해 주시길 바랍니다. Sorry, due to the technical issue, the interpretation cannot be provided. I'm very sorry for the situation. We do have a technical issue here. So I'm going to touch about the first cases. In order to preserve, we have a citizen education case, and in order to create environment, we do have a case for the citizen education. First, in order to preserve environment, as a case for the citizen education, I would like to introduce to you Global Academy for Women. In Suseong Global Academy for Women, there are programs. The goal is think globally and act locally. We have targeted women in order to engage the participation, and when we turn that engagement into activity, I believe that women has more influential power to do so. That's why we targeted the women. Under the belief that the human beings can transform the world, so we are having 1-year curriculum consisting of 20 classes. From 2012, every year we're conducting these classes or curriculum. The topics are environment, energy, input, human rights, and sustainable development, and on-site field, experiential, and workshop, and other activities are included there to make the participants to participate in at least one volunteering activities for them to complete the course. In 2013, the participants formed the community as an NGO when they engaged the ESG program. As a result of their activity, the Korean UNESCO ESG official recognized their program. Now I'm going to talk about some of the practical cases that actually delivered. First, we hosted the World Water Forum in 2015. So we have launched a campaign to save the water. Next, it is a project called EM Soil Ball for improved water quality. We have also conducted the environment education, and also we have thrown the soil ball to the lake and the nearby rivers. And so we have promoted through the campaign how to protect our water. Next, small practices to change the world. That was a sort of a program where they allowed the people or participants to have a reuse waste. So this is a campaign that they have used upcycling. So participants participated in this campaign and they had produced over 300 upcycled product. They do cut their not using jeans and produce this kind of bags, and all these were produced thanks to the voluntary activities of the people. Next, a project called Please Wake Us From Sleeping. Disused or not used stationery product accessories were collected by the citizens, and the citizens themselves have collected all these items to be reused. The product that I don't use can be a new owners to be used completely, and that was the purpose of this case. Next, we had a project to conduct a survey on the use of the plastic recycling. So for these plastics to be reused and to encourage the people to provide their plastic bottles in order to have the recycling. And we have conducted the survey of the plastic bottles by indicating their manufacturers and the name of the drinks and so on. So we have confirmed and analyzed, and also we have provided the result after this campaign. Next, we have conducted to produce a recycled absorbent for the people who are needed this kind of a absorbent, especially for those who are in the vulnerable countries. So volunteers created the absorbent, and also in Cambodia, the people of Korea allowed the people in Cambodia to make the absorbent, and we sent also material for the Cambodians to make the absorbent. Next, of course, the completion of the course is important, but for the sustainability, it is important to increase the participation of others is important, and as part of that, the citation from the Ministry of Environment was very effective. Next, every year we're conducting the overseas volunteering activity. This is a out-of-pocket activity, and we overcome the COVID-19. And at the very initial of the COVID-19 crisis, there was a lack of mask, but we have produced and made the mask to dole out for those who are in need. And also we have conducted this flea market every year offline, but this time we have moved into the online. And all these also showed us that we can bring about this ESD into a life through the various voluntary activities. As a case to create environment, as part of the citizen education, we have a gardening school. Through the greening and gardening, we can pursue the sustainability. We are pursuing ecological city, eco city, human city, and considerate city. Through the participants of the people, we have begun the Suseong-gu Gardening School. The vision of the school is as follows: coexistence, nature, and people create companion plant culture and realize social values. To that end, we are having goals of fostering civic activities and gardening culture in life. And also for the citizens to realize these values, we are going to provide various opportunities. And these are the design for the gardening from the youngsters to the elderly citizens for all age bracket. We are considering their health and also the Earth, planet Earth health. So we are making the civic health and Earth health go hand in hand. And also we are going to promote the creation of social value out of it. Community garden and also the restoration of the community and various events for the industry and other related events will be hosted. Today we are actually having this kind of activity, and we're trying to build a village where this can be actually brought into a life by drawing the future of our city. I have cited the Abner Howard, the UK author, line here: gardening cities of tomorrow. And also Umberto Basser said that we are the guests who are invited to the nature. Please be polite. When you dream yourself, then that's just dream. But if you dream together, then this is a new beginning of the new world, according to him. Now, we have to dream of the future city, and I believe that this venue is the very start of that journey. And according to the recently published by the UNESCO, there is a rethinking education and towards the global common good. This raises a common question to all of us. Many learning cities, while considering the future citizens, we need to cooperate together because of my serenity, so that the neighbors are not uncomfortable, because of our comfort, so that the child is not discomfort, because of the present abundance, so that the future is not poor. And as Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon that can change the world. So all of us today here, in order to create the learning city, we are here today while exchanging information one another. We can exert a greater power. And I would like to thank for giving us an opportunity to present our cases of our cities, and I hope we can share upgraded cases in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Sung-ju Hong from the Municipality of Suseong-gu. Very practical example at the local level with the Global Women's Academy, practice that actually changes the world. And so congratulations on the work you do. Again, a round of applause for the work that you do.